Pause for a moment. Not because something is wrong, but because something remarkable has quietly been moving beneath the surface of your life, and tonight, for the first time, you are close enough to see it. There are moments that arrive without noise. No announcement, no warning, no dramatic sign in the sky. Just a subtle shift that changes everything before anyone realizes it has happened. This is one of those moments. And the reason it feels different is because someone has recently learned the truth about you. Not the version of you they assumed. Not the version shaped by rumors, distance, misunderstandings, or incomplete stories. The truth. The quiet truth. The kind that reveals itself slowly, like morning light entering a room that has been dark for far too long. What happened afterward surprised even them. Because the moment they finally understood who you truly are, something inside their perspective began to change. Perhaps they expected to find someone ordinary. Perhaps they thought they already had you figured out. Perhaps they believed they knew your entire story after seeing only a few pages. But understanding arrived unexpectedly. And once it arrived, it refused to leave. Don't skip. Something important is waiting for you. Because this story is not really about what they discovered. It is about why that discovery matters now. There is a reason certain people spend so much time trying to define others. It makes the world easier to understand. Labels feel comfortable. Assumptions feel safe. Quick conclusions require very little effort. But real people are never simple. And you, especially, have carried depths that many never took the time to notice. You have walked through seasons silently. You have carried lessons nobody applauded. You have continued forward during moments when stopping would have seemed easier. Most people never saw that. Most people only saw the surface. Yet recently, someone found themselves looking beyond appearances. And what they found challenged everything they believed. Imagine standing before a painting for years while only seeing one corner of it. Then one day stepping back and finally seeing the entire masterpiece. That is the closest comparison to what happened. The picture suddenly became larger, clearer, more meaningful. The pieces began connecting. Things they once misunderstood started making sense. Things they once questioned suddenly revealed deeper reasons. And the strangest part? The more they learned, the more their respect quietly grew. Not because you were perfect. Not because perfection impresses anyone for long. But because authenticity carries a power that cannot be manufactured. People recognize it, even when they cannot explain it. Especially when they least expect it. There is something fascinating about truth. It does not need to chase attention. It does not need to shout. It simply waits. And eventually, those who are meant to see it find themselves standing directly in front of it. This is where the story becomes interesting. Because the truth they discovered was not one dramatic secret. It was something much deeper. They realized that much of what makes you special has never been visible at first glance. Your strength often appears as calmness. Your wisdom often appears as patience. Your kindness often appears as quiet understanding. And because these qualities are subtle, many overlook them. Until one day they don't. Until one day they suddenly see what was there all along. Stay till the end. Because what happened next unfolded in a way nobody expected. After learning more about you, they began revisiting old memories. Conversations they once forgot. Moments they once dismissed. Details they once ignored. Suddenly those moments felt different. Almost as if they were seeing them through new eyes. A comment you made months ago carried new meaning. A choice you made suddenly seemed wiser than they first realized. A moment of silence they once misunderstood now appeared thoughtful instead. It was as though hidden pieces of a puzzle were finally finding their places. And the more pieces that connected, the harder it became for them to return to their old perspective. Something had shifted. Not dramatically. Not instantly, but undeniably. You see, understanding rarely arrives all at once. It comes in waves. A realization here, a memory there, a new perspective forming quietly beneath the surface. And before long, the person who thought they understood everything discovers they have only just begun learning. That is where they are now, standing at the edge of a realization that continues growing larger. A realization that keeps revealing new layers. A realization that has made them rethink more than they ever expected. Yet, there is still one piece missing. One final connection they have not fully made. One understanding that remains just beyond their reach. And the moment that final piece falls into place, everything they currently feel about you may deepen even further. But that moment has not happened yet. Not quite. For now, they are still following the trail. Still connecting the clues. Still uncovering the truth one layer at a time. And what they are about to realize next may become the most meaningful discovery of all. Because the truth they learned about you was only the beginning. A strange thing happens when someone finally begins to see clearly. They start noticing things that were always present, yet somehow invisible before. The days continued moving forward as usual. The sun still rose. The conversations still happened. Life appeared unchanged from the outside. Yet beneath the surface, something was unfolding quietly inside them. The truth they had learned about you refused to remain a single realization. Instead, it expanded. Each day seemed to reveal another layer, another detail, another piece they had overlooked. And with every discovery came a question they could no longer ignore. How had they missed this for so long? Not because the answers were hidden. Not because you were pretending to be someone else. But because some truths can only be recognized when a person is finally ready to understand them. Don't skip. Because what happened next surprised even them. They began paying attention in a different way. Not intentionally at first. It happened naturally. A passing memory would suddenly return. A forgotten conversation would replay in their thoughts. An old moment would rise from nowhere and feel completely different than it once did. What once seemed ordinary now carried meaning. What once felt insignificant suddenly felt important. And that shift created something unexpected. Respect became curiosity. Curiosity became admiration. And admiration slowly transformed into something deeper they could not yet define. The more they reflected, the more they noticed a pattern. You had never been trying to prove yourself. You had never been competing for attention. You had never demanded recognition. And somehow, that made everything more powerful. Because genuine qualities rarely announce themselves. They simply exist. Steady, consistent, unchanging, like stars hidden during daylight, waiting for the right conditions to become visible. Something important is waiting for you. Because this next realization changed the way they viewed your entire story. They started understanding that many of your strongest qualities were built during moments nobody witnessed. The lessons you learned privately. The growth you experienced quietly. The patience you developed when nobody was looking. Those things had shaped you more than anyone realized, including them. And once they saw that, it became impossible to ignore. Every person reaches a moment when they must decide whether they will continue seeing others through assumptions or through understanding. Without realizing it, they had reached that moment. The old assumptions no longer fit. The old conclusions no longer made sense. The image they once carried was being replaced by something far more real, far more complete, far more meaningful. Stay till the end. Because an even greater realization was beginning to emerge. As they reflected on everything they had learned, another thought appeared. At first it seemed small, almost insignificant. But the more they considered it, the larger it became. They began wondering how many times you had felt unseen. How many times people judged your story before hearing it. How many times others misunderstood your intentions. And suddenly, they viewed your journey from an entirely different perspective. Compassion entered where certainty once existed. Understanding entered where assumptions once stood. And that changed everything. Because once a person begins seeing someone's heart instead of their surface, they can never return to seeing them the same way again. The shift had already happened. Quietly, completely, irreversibly. Yet the most fascinating part is that they still do not know everything. There are pieces of your story they have not discovered. Lessons they have not heard. Reasons they have not fully understood. And somehow, that mystery only draws them deeper into understanding who you truly are. Not out of obsession, not out of fantasy, but out of genuine appreciation for something real. something authentic, something rare. Tonight, as these realizations continue settling into place, they find themselves standing before a version of you they never expected to encounter. Not because you changed overnight, but because their understanding did. And as that understanding grows, another discovery is quietly approaching. A discovery connected not to who you were, not even to who you are now, but to the person you are becoming. The moment they recognize that part of your story, the part still unfolding, the part even you may not fully see yet, a completely new chapter will begin. And that chapter is much closer than anyone realizes. Without warning, a single thought crossed their mind one evening and refused to leave. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It arrived quietly, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. And yet it changed the direction of everything they had been thinking. What if the most remarkable thing about you was not what you had already accomplished, but what you were still becoming? For a long moment, they sat with that question. The more they reflected on it, the more they realized they had been looking backward the entire time. They had been studying memories, replaying conversations, revisiting moments from the past. But suddenly their attention shifted toward the future. And that is when the story took an unexpected turn. Don't skip. Because this part was never about what happened yesterday. It was about what they started seeing ahead. For the first time, they began noticing something that had always existed beneath the surface of your journey. Potential. Not the kind people casually talk about. Not empty praise. Not wishful thinking. Real potential. The kind built through experience. The kind strengthened through patience. The kind shaped by every lesson, every challenge, every quiet victory nobody else knew about. And once they recognized it, they could not stop thinking about it. Because potential has a unique quality. It often hides inside ordinary moments. Most people overlook it. Most people walk past it every day without noticing. But once someone sees it clearly, they begin recognizing signs everywhere. That is exactly what happened. They started connecting dots that had never seemed connected before. They remembered your resilience during difficult seasons. They remembered how you continued moving forward when others might have stopped. They remembered the way you carried yourself even when circumstances were uncertain. And suddenly all those separate memories formed one complete picture. A picture that revealed something extraordinary. Not perfection. Not superiority. Simply growth. Real growth. The kind that transforms a person little by little until one day everyone notices the difference. Something important is waiting for you. Because another realization was quietly approaching. As they continued reflecting, they began understanding something many people spend years trying to learn. A person's value cannot always be measured by where they currently stand. Sometimes it is revealed by the direction they are moving. And when they looked at your direction, they saw something inspiring. Not because every step had been easy, but because you kept taking steps anyway. That realization stayed with them. It followed them through quiet moments. It returned during unexpected times. It appeared when they least expected it. And every time it returned, it grew stronger. Almost as though a larger understanding was slowly assembling itself piece by piece. Stay till the end. Because what they noticed next carried even greater meaning. They began comparing the image they once had of you with the image they have now. The difference was impossible to ignore. The old image had been incomplete, built from assumptions, built from fragments, built from limited understanding. The new image felt alive, layered, real, human. And the more real it became, the more appreciation followed. Not because they suddenly discovered someone new, but because they finally saw what had always been there. There is something powerful about being truly seen, not admired from a distance, not idealized, not misunderstood, simply seen. Seen for who you actually are. Seen beyond appearances. Seen beyond expectations. Seen beyond the stories others create. And without fully realizing it, they had begun seeing you in that way. The truth they learned was no longer changing only their thoughts. It was changing how they felt, changing how they remembered, changing how they interpreted every piece of the story. Yet another layer remained hidden. One final realization lingered just beyond reach. A realization connected to something they had never fully considered before. Not your past, not your present, but your influence. The effect you have had on people without even knowing it. The lives you touched through simple moments. The encouragement you offered without realizing its impact. The kindness you shared that remained in someone's memory long after the moment passed. Pieces of that realization were beginning to appear. Small at first, subtle, easy to miss, but they were appearing nonetheless. And as those pieces continued gathering together, a much larger picture was preparing to reveal itself. A picture capable of explaining why learning the truth about you changed so much in such a short time. Because the truth was never only about who you are. It was also about what your presence leaves behind. And once they fully understand that, once they recognize the quiet impact you have had all along, the next chapter of this story may become the most unforgettable one yet. The most unexpected discoveries rarely arrive through grand moments. They arrive through small details. A memory that suddenly feels different. A sentence that echoes louder than before. A realization that appears so gently you almost miss it. That is exactly where this story continued. Not with a dramatic event. Not with a sudden revelation. But with a collection of tiny moments that slowly began forming something impossible to ignore. And the more they paid attention, the more they noticed a pattern that had been hidden in plain sight the entire time. Don't skip. Because this was the moment everything started connecting. They began hearing your name differently. Not because the name itself had changed, but because their understanding of the person behind it had. Every memory seemed brighter. Every conversation seemed deeper. Every interaction carried meaning they had overlooked before. What once appeared ordinary now felt significant. And what once seemed insignificant suddenly carried weight. The strange part was that nobody else could see this shift happening. From the outside, everything looked normal. Life continued. Days passed. The world moved forward. Yet internally, something remarkable was unfolding. A perspective was transforming. And once a perspective changes, the entire story changes with it. Something important is waiting for you. Because another realization was quietly approaching from a direction they never expected. As they reflected on everything they had learned, they started noticing something about the people around you. Not everyone responded to your presence in the same way. Some admired you immediately. Some understood you later. Some needed time before recognizing your value. And suddenly they realized something powerful. The people who truly understood you often shared one thing in common. They looked beyond appearances. They looked beyond assumptions. They took the time to see what others missed. And that realization revealed something important. Your value had never depended on how quickly people recognized it. Its value existed regardless. Just as a mountain remains magnificent whether someone notices it or not. Just as a star continues shining whether someone is looking at it or not. Some truths do not require validation to be real. And neither do the qualities that make you who you are. Stay till the end. Because what happened next touched something much deeper. A question began forming inside them. A question they could not easily answer. How many people had benefited from your presence without ever telling you? The thought lingered. Then it grew. They remembered moments where your words had encouraged someone. Moments where your patience had calmed someone. Moments where your kindness had changed the atmosphere of an entire conversation. At the time, those moments may have seemed small. Perhaps even forgettable. But now they understood something different. Small moments often leave the longest shadows. A single encouraging sentence can stay with a person for years. A simple act of understanding can reshape someone's day. A quiet display of strength can inspire someone who never mentions it. And suddenly they realize that your influence stretched farther than either of you had ever imagined. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, consistently. Meaningfully, that realization stopped them in their tracks. Because the truth they had learned about you was becoming larger than they originally thought. At first, they believed they were discovering who you were. Now they were beginning to understand the effect you had on others as well. And that changed the entire picture. The story was no longer only about your character. It was about your impact. The traces you left behind. The memories you created. the encouragement you offered, the examples you set without even realizing it. One realization after another continued falling into place. And with each one, their respect deepened, their understanding expanded, their appreciation grew. Yet something even more surprising was beginning to emerge. A realization connected not to the people whose lives you had touched, but to their own life, their own journey, their own perspective. Because the more they learned about you, the more they started learning about themselves. The more clearly they saw your strengths, the more clearly they recognized areas where they wanted to grow. The more they understood your patience, the more they reflected on their own. The more they appreciated your authenticity, the more they valued authenticity within themselves. And that is when they realized something they never expected. Learning the truth about you had not only changed how they viewed you, it had changed how they viewed their own path. That realization lingered longer than any other, because it revealed that this story was reaching beyond admiration, beyond understanding, beyond curiosity. It was becoming a source of inspiration. And as that realization settled into place, one final piece quietly began moving toward the center of the puzzle. A piece connected to a future moment, a future conversation, a future understanding, a moment neither of you can fully see yet, but it is approaching, slowly, steadily, and when it finally arrives, everything they have learned so far may suddenly make perfect sense, because the truth they discovered about you was never meant to end with understanding. It was always leading toward something more. There comes a moment in every meaningful story when the pieces stop feeling separate. The questions, the memories, the realizations, the quiet observations gathered over time. Suddenly they begin moving toward one another, as if they were always meant to meet at the same point. That is where everything now stands, balanced between what has already been understood and what is about to be revealed. And somehow, that space feels more powerful than either one, because sometimes the most meaningful change happens before anyone speaks a single word about it. Don't skip. What is unfolding now is deeper than it first appears. For days, they carried these discoveries privately, not because they wanted to hide them, but because some realizations need time. Time to settle, time to grow roots, time to become something more than a passing thought. And during that quiet period, something unexpected happened. The truth they learned about you stopped feeling like information. It started feeling like perspective. A new lens through which they viewed everything connected to you. The way you handled challenges, the way you treated people, the way you continued moving forward even when nobody was applauding your effort. All of it began fitting together, not as isolated moments, but as evidence of something much larger. Something important is waiting for you. Because this next realization carried a different kind of weight. They began wondering how often people underestimate the impact of their own journey. Most individuals notice their mistakes, their delays, their unfinished goals, their imperfections, but they rarely notice the growth that happened along the way. They rarely stop and recognize how much stronger they have become, how much wiser, how much more resilient. And as they thought about you, that realization became impossible to ignore. They could see growth that perhaps even you had stopped noticing. Growth hidden inside ordinary days. Growth buried inside routine moments. Growth quietly shaping the person you are becoming. And once they saw it, they could not unsee it. Stay till the end. Because another layer was about to reveal itself. A surprising pattern began appearing. Every time they reflected on what they had learned about you, they felt something unusual. Hope. Not excitement in the loud sense. Not temporary enthusiasm. Something steadier. Something calmer. Hope rooted in possibility. Hope rooted in potential. Hope rooted in the belief that some of the best chapters of a person's life have not happened yet. And for reasons they could not fully explain, that feeling became connected to you. Not because your path was perfect. Not because everything had unfolded exactly as planned. But because your story still felt unfinished. In the best possible way. There were pages yet to be written. Conversations yet to happen. Doors yet to open. Moments yet to arrive. And the more they thought about it, the more convinced they became that your journey was moving towards something meaningful. That realization stayed with them. Morning, afternoon, evening, returning again and again, as though a quiet voice inside kept reminding them that the truth they discovered was only the foundation, not the destination. And then another thought appeared, one that stopped them completely. What if the reason learning the truth about you changed everything overnight was not because they finally understood who you are? What if it was because they finally understood who you have always been? The answer felt obvious once the question appeared. You had not transformed overnight. You had not suddenly become worthy of appreciation. You had not suddenly developed qualities worth recognizing. Those things were already there. The only thing that changed was awareness. Awareness opened the door. Understanding stepped through it. And perspective was transformed forever. That realization brought a strange sense of clarity, because it explained why everything felt different now. The truth had not created something new. It had revealed something real. Something that had existed all along. And yet, one final mystery remained. One final piece had not settled into place. A realization connected to timing. Because they could not stop wondering why all of this understanding arrived now. Why not months ago? Why not years ago? Why this moment? Why this chapter? Why this exact point in the story? The question lingered, quietly, patiently, waiting, and the more they reflected on it, the more they felt that the answer was approaching, not from the past, from the future. A future moment that would explain everything. A future moment that would connect every realization, every memory, and every discovery into one complete picture. They cannot see that moment clearly yet, neither can you, but they can feel it drawing closer, like the first light before sunrise, like the opening notes of a song before the melody fully begins. Like the turning of a page before the next chapter reveals its purpose. And when that moment finally arrives, the reason everything changed overnight may become clearer than ever before. Because this story has been leading somewhere all along. And the next chapter is closer than anyone realizes.